Good morning. Well, today is April the 17th. I looked up this day in history and found this was a pretty significant day in history. For instance, in 1194, Richard the Lionheart was crowned King of England for the second time. In 1790, Benjamin Franklin died, one of the most influential men of his time, a brilliant, brilliant thinker. In 1894, Nikita Khrushchev was born. Little did anyone know on that day the damage that he would do throughout his life. It was the day in 1951 when Mickey Mantle debuted as a New York Yankee. No one had any idea the significance of that day and the career that would follow. 1961 was the Bay of Pigs invasion. It was a day that the United States expected was going to take a big step forward in the fight against communism. It turned out to be a brutal disaster. And then in 1970, this was the day that the Apollo 13 command module splashed down. It was that particular event that really caught my attention. As many of you will remember from the movie, it was on April 11th that Apollo 13 took off with the plan to once again visit the moon, collect samples, and have the opportunity to move space exploration forward. And no one knew on April 11th what a good day that was, because later on, when they recovered the main engines, they found that the second engine had actually shut down early, and it was because a safety valve had cut it off. If it had run one more revolution, that engine would have exploded, would have sent all of those astronauts to their death, similar to how the Challenger disaster did years later. But that didn't happen, and so it was a very good day. But it was only 2 days later, on April 13th, when one of the astronauts was stirring one of the oxygen containers, something that they had to do as a matter of course, and then that oxygen container exploded. It made the trip to the moon impossible, and it put every life at peril. From that point on, the mission was only about survival. The dream of going to the moon was over. The plans that they had put in place were removed, and now they had to chart a different course. On April 14th, the very next day, they whipped around the moon to get the speed to come back to Earth. And they all had to look at what might have been, but wasn't, because of the unexpected challenges that came their way. And then from the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, until the moment that they splashed down, every day was just a fight for survival. There was too much CO2. There was too much water in the air. The temperatures were freezing in the compartment. And one of the astronauts actually got a severe case of pneumonia. They did not know from day to day what was going to happen. What was the next challenge they were going to face? Were they actually going to make it? And so, when they landed on the 17th, it was a tremendous success. Well, they didn't achieve the original mission. They didn't accomplish what they had set out to accomplish, and yet when it was all over, they survived. And survival by itself was such a tremendous accomplishment. I think the Bible leads us to that understanding that life is unpredictable. Life is something that we think we make plans for, but sometimes those plans go awry. Most times those plans go awry. In Isaiah, in that prophecy, Isaiah says, "Forget the former things. Don't dwell on the past." If we live our lives thinking about what might have been, all we'll have is a life of regret. But then Jesus speaks about the other side in Matthew chapter 6. He says, "Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Well, certainly, that's what got the Apollo 13 astronauts through, was the recognition that all they could handle was today. So if we're not supposed to worry about yesterday and we're not supposed to worry about tomorrow, then what do we do? Well, the psalmist in Psalm 118 says, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it." We don't know if this is a day when someone significant will be born, when someone important will die, when some random event will turn out to have huge significance for history. We just don't know. But we're given today to live. The great philosopher Harold Hill in the musical, The Music Man, was talking to Marion the librarian, and he says this to her: "Oh, my dear little librarian, you pile up enough tomorrows, and you'll find you've collected nothing but a lot of empty yesterdays. I don't know about you, but I'd like to make today worth remembering." None of us knows what's coming ahead for us. We only have today. Let's rejoice in today, recognizing that God has given it to us. Let's put it to its best use possible. Let's appreciate the anticipation of what might be, and let's appreciate the possibility of what we don't expect. But let's make it a day worth remembering. Have a great week.